Alright, so welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at the one and only DarkVoice 336 SE OTL tube amplifier. So a lot of people in the hi-fi community claim that tube amplifiers are a game changer. A lot of people kept advocating on behalf of pairing the Sennheiser HD600 and HD800 and 800S with a tube amp. Though I have had the chance to try out tube amps before, I've never really owned one nor had one in my possession so I could listen to my own tracks at my own setup. Well, I finally bit the bullet and bought one using my own money. And what better tube amp to start with than the legendary DarkVoice 336 SE. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right in. Now, as far as the contents are concerned, this is actually pretty straightforward. You get the DarkVoice 336 SE tube amplifier, you get the 6.8NP and 6N5P tubes, those are your preamp and power tubes respectively, and you get the power cable. That's it really. Now let's talk about the build and I/O. Before actually having seen a DarkVoice in person, I was quite curious about how heavy the unit is. Based off of what I had heard, I thought I was practically going to have to start lifting weights just to operate the thing. Thankfully, it's not that heavy. Most of the weight lies on the rear of the unit, but it really isn't all that concerning at all. There really isn't much about the in and outs to cover here either. On the front of the device, you have the on and off toggle, which makes a super tasty clicky sound. Listen to this. A blue LED power indicator, the volume knob, and the 4th-inch single-ended port. This knob, by the way, has quite a bit of resistance when turning it and is really, really smooth. Like, it does feel extremely high quality, I'm not gonna lie. Though I must say, I don't like the feeling of the sides where your fingers grip onto. Oh my god. If you weren't looking at the knob and tried turning it with very minimal pressure, it feels like you're actually turning it. Not that there's loose plastic or anything, the texture of the knob just kind of gives off a weird feeling. I would like to have seen a crosshatch type of pattern on that instead. It might have given the volume knob better gripability and given it a higher quality feel. Nothing on the sides of the unit, just some ventilation holes. Now on the top of the unit you can see both tubes required to operate the DarkVoice. If you're looking to tube roll in the future, look for one 6S and 7 tube, that is the preamp tube, and the 6A57, the power tube. Now I'll include a couple of links in the description to a couple of online forums for some popular tube rolling suggestions for the DarkVoice. And on the rear of the unit you got the power port, dual RCA inputs, dual RCA outputs, and that's it. Okay, gentlemen, no more hesitation. Let's jump into the sound and performance section of this review. Now, upon listening to the DarkVoice at my own setup, I was pretty impressed, actually. See, here's the thing about tube amps. They with your sound. No other way around it. They introduce distortion whether you like it or not. In fact, the DarkVoice is rated at around less than 2% total distortion. Compared to today's modern day solid state amplifiers, that's really not so good. Really not so good. However, cast your fears aside because it's not as bad as it sounds. So I began testing with the HD600s. I started out by listening to a track through the THX AAA 789. After that, I was going to plug into the DarkVoice with the dial at around 10 AM, which is what it's set to on my AAA 789, but decided to start it off at 0 instead, which is about 6:30, give or take, and then move up from there. Jeez, am I glad I did that. I slowly started cranking it up. I am not joking you. I reached my limit at around 7 AM tops. When you turn this thing on, it takes about 15 seconds for the tubes to warm up and start producing any sort of sound. However, you'll want to wait a little while longer before listening if you really want to get the best sound out of them. It really shouldn't be longer than about a minute though. So let's go ahead and start off with the HD600s here. Bass guitars are a little more woolly through the DarkVoice. Quick example here, Zealots of Stockholm by Childish Gambino. At the minute 34 mark, the warmth of that electronic note is it's clearly thicker on the DarkVoice than through the 789. No doubt the note is definitely warmer on the DarkVoice. Seriously, I started on solid state and heard the tight response I've always heard. Then I swapped over to the DarkVoice and it just hit me like the airbag in a car. Just a sudden puff right in your face. Another example, Ghost by Aura and Alan Walker. By the way, comment if you enjoyed Death Stranding. I actually enjoyed the game. Now once again, I heard that extra warmth in the mid-bass more than anything else. It did increase slam by a small amount too. Overall, the DarkVoice managed to increase the mid-bass quantity more than anything else, at least on the HD600. That said, it did not affect the quality of the mid bass. It's still very solid and detailed, which was actually pretty surprising. Now in the mids, the DarkVoice seemed to slightly smooth out female vocals just a bit, but also introduced a slight bit of haziness to them, so it's practically nothing though, so I really wouldn't be concerned about that. Other than that, there really aren't any significant changes to the mids on the DarkVoice. Now generally, the DarkVoice brings out the treble response a slight amount. It steps forward a bit and reveals a little bit of extra detail. It brings out a little bit of extra sizzle to the notes as well. Now on the soundstage and imaging does improve a bit. This must be where the blackness of the tube amplifier comes into play. So, quick example, Hotel California by the Eagles, each instrument sounds a bit more separated from each other. Like you can clearly hear the separation between where each instrument ends, with less of a mashup between two instruments. And soundstage does grow a tad wider, though not enough to justify the purchase just on soundstage alone. Now the Sennheiser HD560S. I was quite curious about using these on an amplifier. Their bass is excellent, and while I do love it for its neutrality, I wondered what a tube amp could do to them. Same goes with the treble. I like the slight sizzle it has up top, but I just wondered what a tube amp would do to it as well. So the DarkVoice does something quite similar with the bass response. It gives bass guitars a little bit of extra heft and wooliness. It provides electronic bass with a little bit of extra slam and rumble as well. So going back to the track Ghost, at the minute 58 to 221 mark, you can hear the upper bass note sounding more forward and, to my perception at least, sound like it's playing from like right behind my earlobe, as opposed to right in front of it. Same thing with Zealots of Stockholm. Try the HD560S on solid state and you'll say, yep, that's it. Then you try them on the DarkVoice and you say, oh my goodness, that bass valley at 305, it just goes all the way. It goes all the way. It just works.
Everything just works because ray tracing just works.
Female vocals stepped forward a bit and got a little sweeter to listen to as well. Now treble doesn't face a massive difference, which, in my opinion, is good enough. But it does gain a slight amount of sizzle up top, particularly with the upper percussive instruments such as hi-hats and cymbals. Sibilance is also increased, but a very, very slight increment. It's really nothing to lose sleep over. Now, I don't really feel it affected soundstage or imaging all that much. All I can really mention about soundstage is that with the DarkVoice, the extra warmth in the bass really reverberates around the walls of the soundstage, testing out its boundaries. Now you thought that was the end of it, but wait, there's more! Now I'm going to be speaking about these two side by side, but if there is a very, very specific difference, I will be sure to point it out here. Now again, with the bass, it brings it a bit forward and increases the warmth and presence a little. On the HD800, I say it is mostly welcome. On the HD800S, however, the extra warmth can be quite a bit too much for my tastes. Of course, that does depend on the track being played. Now, vocals do step a little bit forward. Here's the funny thing. Pizzicato on the cello gains a little extra texture on the HD800, while it actually does the opposite on the 800S for some reason. Now, treble does get a little aggressive too, though, so that's not something I particularly enjoy, especially with these that are already kind of treble capable, shall we say. Now the DarkVoice fills out the soundstage on the HD800S a little bit. Not that they get wider, but it sounds like the instruments managed to spread across the area a tad better. Now for some quick notes and observations, a little detail I noticed. When I wasn't playing any sounds and the amplifier was on, I could hear a little bit of fuzziness every now and then. It was nothing massive, just a little 1 second fuzzy sound, and then once I started playing a track, I would hear a similar fuzzy sound through the right channel, sort of embedded within the track somehow. Now that is to say, I would not notice that unless a slightly less loud portion of the track came on. Now another thing to point out, even when trying to match volumes between the DarkVoice and the solid state amplifier, the 789 in this particular case, the DarkVoice will in most cases have a sort of energetic sound to it, because the damn thing is just that powerful. It really is. Also notice how all 4 of the headphones I tested with the DarkVoice are dynamic drivers. That's because you should not use Planars with this. Now I decided to try out the Sundaras on the DarkVoice, and it sounded strange. Sounded a little strange. Now, at first I tried listening to music and the overall timbre of the track was a little wonky, right? Something just didn't feel right. But I said, maybe the DarkVoice sound just isn't ideal with the Sundaras. Maybe I'm just imagining things, maybe it just sounds better through solid state, right? Then I plugged the Sundaras into my XXX, Jesus Christ. Then I plugged the Sundaras into a solid state amplifier again, and I was blown away by what I had heard. They sounded far cleaner, and there was actual sub bass. Now the way I'm saying this probably doesn't sound exciting because you know that the Sundaras have actual sub bass, but now I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but sure enough, the DarkVoice completely eliminated the sub bass response of the Sundaras. So what's the lesson here? Even if you have Planars and the DarkVoice, do not pair them together. It's not about asking whether you could, it's about whether you should. So to conclude, as my first tube amplifier, I really think the DarkVoice was really worth it. It gives me an extra flavor to choose from every now and then. It opened my world to tube amplifiers, and it straight up looks cool, you know? It's one of those retro things that it's like, oh, I get it now. There's a little subreddit on Reddit that I do follow. It's called r/drunk hi-fi. It's just a bunch of people, taking a picture of whatever liquor they're drinking and whatever album they're listening to on their typically vinyl setup with high-end studio monitors or speakers and through a tube amplifier. So that's kind of cool. Very, very cool. Now keep in mind, the following tests were performed using the stock tubes that come with the DarkVoice. A lot of people basically tell you to just throw those away and purchase some decent aftermarket tubes. Will that actually make a difference? I guess we'll find out in a future video. But yeah, I definitely intend on filming a part 2 to this review, where I'll gather a bunch of popular opinions and tube pairing suggestions, compare them to each other, and then discuss my experience after tube rolling so many options. So do keep an eye out for that, and if you know of any popular suggestions, leave them down below in the comment section, and hey, I might just pick those up. So anyway, that's gonna go ahead and do it for me. You know what to do down below. Thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate you sticking around, and I hope you got something out of this. I will see you in the following video.